Okay, the first thing we need to get out of the way is defining how the monetary exchange between money and product is supposed to work. Okay, so let's say you are a business, I don't know, whatever kind of business. You're a food store. That makes it nice and easy. And you need jugs or a cup or something to sell your soda in. And we're going to use a very generic example of this, okay? So here we go. We have a cup, okay? Your business needs cups. Now, in business and in economics, this is actually a pretty simple problem. Execution is difficult, of course, that there's a lot of nuance in execution, but the core fundamental concept, stupid thing keeps popping up. The core fundamental concept is actually pretty simple. You only have three choices. There is no choice four, you only have three. You can buy it, you can make it yourself, or you can do without it. For every product that you need, for everything you need to buy, whether it be cups, straws, food, soda syrup, carbonated water, electricity, rent, water, sewer, whatever it is, anything you need to exchange currency for, you only have three valid choices. You can buy it, you can make it yourself, or you can do without it. So in the context of a cup, you can buy the cups from someone else. Or you can start your own production facility and make your own cups. Or you can figure out how to operate your business without cups. Those are your three choices. If you actually run a business and you actually sit down and think about it, those are your choices. You don't have any other choices. You can either buy the cups from somebody, make the cups yourself, or do without cups. Okay, that's it. Those are your choices. Now, each of those can get a little complicated. For example, let's say I sell, bottles of soda and I need caps. Okay? And I don't like how much XYZ Caps Incorporated is selling caps for. We go back and forth and try to negotiate, but the lowest price the XYZ Caps Incorporated is offering is more than I'm willing to pay, or more than I want to pay. Okay, so option one is off the table. The next option is option two. I can make the caps myself. Now, let's say you go through the process of seeing what it would cost to build a factory and to produce your own caps, and you realize, okay, I really can't do it myself in any reasonable time for less than what XYZ Caps Incorporated is selling for. Well, you could choose to do without caps. For example, you could just decide to have soda fountain drinks. Well, now you don't need bottles and you don't need caps. You just need cups, okay? So you can buy it, you can make them yourself, or you can figure out a way to do without them. This applies to every single thing that you have to buy, every single product. Everything is a product. Electricity is a product. The lease, it's a product. The building, the land. Everything you buy is a product that you were trying to buy from someone else or trying to make yourself. You can try to also alter your business to work around the need for that product and do without it. Okay? So, for example, if a brick and mortar store is too expensive, you could try an online store. The type of product you're selling might be compatible with that. Selling fountain sodas online, not going to work so well. But selling bottled soda online, that might work. Although shipping is going to hurt you because soda is really heavy. You see my point. Okay? You have three choices. Now, let's go into each one of those individual choices. Start with the easiest one, number three, do without. That's pretty easy. Either your business can operate without it, or your business can't operate without it. If your business can operate without it, you have to choose, is the hardship of operating without it worth the savings of not having to buy or make whatever it is you need yourself? You have to make that choice. That's a business choice. Option number two, do it yourself. Well, that's pretty simple. Can you do it yourself? Can you do it for cheaper than what it costs to buy it? Again, that's something you're going to have to figure out. It's going to be very different for every product. The brick and mortar store, probably not. Most likely you're not going to be able to buy a piece of vacant land in a prime commercial location and build your own building. That's probably not going to be equitable. So you pretty much have to either not have the business or have an online business, or you have to buy or rent or lease a commercial property from someone else. Now, let's look over the first choice, because that's the one that's going to be key to the discussion later when it comes to wages. The first one is you have to buy it from someone else. One of the first things you're going to hear somebody say is that, well, market forces determine how much you pay for something. That's not true. If you actually run a business, if you actually have any clue what you're doing, of course I'm not prepared. I do not have a pen, so we're going to have to do this without pen and paper. Market forces do not determine the price of a product. But it's important for you to understand what the price of a product is. When I go to, the bottle caps are easier. When I go to decide whether I want to buy your bottle caps or make my own bottle caps, well, there are two numbers that make up the price of this bottle cap. Okay? We are assuming a frozen in time, split moment in time, okay, a split second moment in time, and you have to make the choice of make them yourself, do without them, or buy them from this person. You can't talk about the resources that are required to make this, because that's going to fluctuate over time. We're talking about, I need bottle caps right, time freezes, and you have to make the choice, okay? So that means all of the cost to produce this cap is off the table of the discussion, because that's going to be for a future time. Right now, the caps exist. You need them now. You have to buy them now. You can't worry about what they cost last year. You can't worry about what they might cost in a year from now. You need the caps now. We're fixing time at this point in moment. At the decision tree, you need to make a choice. Okay? The price of this bottle cap is composed of $2 values. Those $2 values together make up the price of this bottle cap. Okay? Market forces have no say in this. Supply and demand has no say in this. Partially. The $2 values that make up the price of this bottle cap are the cost and the sticker price. The sticker price is the difference between the cost and the amount I'm able to get for it. So let's say, these are preposterous numbers, but we're going to make this very, very simple to understand in our brains. Let's say it costs me $1 to make this cap, and I'm selling the cap for $2. Okay? So you have a $2 bottle cap, and the price of that bottle cap is made up of two values. It's made up of the cost, which is $1, and it's made up of my profit, which is $1. $1 plus $1 is $2. That's the sticker price of the bottle cap. Market forces and supply and demand do not determine this price. They can influence it, but they can't determine it. And the only portion of this price that market forces can influence is the value between $1.01 and $2.00. Because my cost of $1 is fixed. I've made the million bottle caps. No market forces in the world can influence the $1 it costs me to make that bottle cap. The only thing market forces and supply and demand can influence is how much more than $1 I can command for my bottle caps. And that's going to come down to competition. Let's assume I'm XYZ Bottle Cap Incorporated and I am the cheapest one. That's why you are talking to me. Everybody else is more expensive. Okay? So now the question is, can you build a factory to make these bottle caps for less than $1? If you can, and you know you're going to be in business long enough to be able to amortize that cost, well then, like Pepsi and Coke and everybody else, you make your own bottle caps. Because you can do it cheaper. You don't have to pay all of my overhead. You'll have your own overhead, which you'll have more control over. So let's assume that you're not big enough to do that, and you can't make the bottle caps yourself. That's option 2. Do it yourself. Okay? So you have to buy them. Well, my price isn't fixed in stone, typically. This is, to some extent, a negotiation. Okay? So maybe I am making bottle caps for the cheapest price, $1, but I'm not selling them for the cheapest price. I'm selling them for $2, and that guy over there is selling them for $1.80. So, well, okay, how many do you have to buy for $1.80? If you buy that many, I'll match his price. I'll give it to you for $1.80. See, that's negotiation. That's how that works. Maybe if you're willing to buy 1 million bottle caps, I might sell them to you for $1.10. I'm losing 90% of my profit, but I'm getting a big old chunk of change right now. And I can reinvest, I can expand my company, I can do all kinds of things. So if you're buying enough bottle caps, I might be willing to really come down on that price. But there's one price I cannot go below, and that's $1. Because it costs me $1. You cannot go below cost. If you try to go below cost, if you try to compel it, you get no bottle caps. Because I won't sell them to you. I'm not going to sell them at a loss. Okay? If market forces will not tolerate a $1 bottle cap, then the market gets no bottle caps. I close up my factory doors, I take my ball, and I go home, and I do something else that's more profitable. But under no conditions do you get bottle caps, because I'm not going to sell them to you at below cost. Okay? You see how that works. If you run a business, then you know how this works. This is very logical. This is very sane. This makes perfect sense. Nobody running a business is going to disagree with anything I've just said. Okay? But here's where I trap you. Okay? And this is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. Because you're going to reject the next thing I say. Because you can't function with the next thing I say. So you have to reject it. You've been brainwashed and propagandized to not believe this next part, even though you agree with everything I've said up to this point. Okay? Labor is a product. No different than the bottle cap. No different than the cup. No different than your lease. No different than your taxes. No different than your electricity. No different than your bottles or the light bulbs. The light bulbs that illuminate your shop. Okay? Labor is a product. And as with every other product, the price of labor is made up of two numbers. We're going to simplify. I might be using the wrong terms here. Okay, so I'm going to explain what I mean by my terms. So if I'm using the wrong term, just replace it with the correct term without changing the meaning. Okay? It's made up of cost and profit. In this context, I define profit as anything that you can get above cost. So this bottle cap costs $1. If I sell it for $1.01, my profit is 1 penny. If I sell it for $1.10, my profit is 10 cents. Market forces can impact the profit, but not the cost, because the cost is not determined by market forces. The cost is not determined by supply and demand. Only the profit is determined by supply and demand. When we talk about wages, we have two values, the same thing. We have the cost and we have the profit. I'm going to give those two things names. I'm going to call cost survival wage. I'm going to call the entire thing a living wage. So a living wage, supply and demand and market forces can determine how close or how far a living wage is from a survival wage. But they cannot determine the survival wage, because the survival wage is determined by different factors. The survival wage is determined by what it costs to keep a human being, on average, in an average society, alive. Keep them breathing from day to day. That's the cost. That's survival wage. Market forces and supply and demand have no impact on this. You might be able to force the value to be less than a survival wage, but that doesn't change the fact that that survival number is what that person needs in order to live. So again, that's no different than forcing a person to take less than cost for their bottle caps. The reason this is a problem with wages is because as a company making bottle caps, if you attempt to force me to sell the bottle caps for less than what it costs me to make the bottle caps, I close up my shop and I go out of business. And I take my ball, I go home, and I start a different business that's more profitable, since obviously bottle caps is not where it's at anymore. You don't get the bottle caps. Wages, they don't work quite the same way. And that's because the close up shop and go home and take my ball with me equals death. It's the same for the business. The result of closing up shop and going home is death. Except in this context, the death is of that corporation. And no one dies when that corporation dies. I just go start another corporation that's more profitable. Right? Corporations don't die like people die. But they do die. They cease to exist. They cease to be. The problem is when a human being ceases to be, it's not so clean and not so nice. You starve, you become homeless, you get sick, you get shot, you die of the elements in the middle of the alley behind the business somewhere. Okay, you die. Okay? So when it comes to labor, their interaction is no longer voluntary. When we say voluntary, we actually mean freedom of choice. We don't mean choice. We mean freedom of choice. That means you are free to choose to or not to. With the bottle caps, I am free to choose to or not to. If I'm not going to make a profit, I choose not to, and you get no bottle caps. A laborer can't do that. Because choosing not to means you die. If you made minimum wage $1 an hour, people would still take those jobs. Why? Why would anybody take $1 an hour job? Because even $1 an hour will delay death. And as a living, breathing, sentient, sapient being, you will do almost anything to avoid dying. So imagine I meet you in a dark alley. I'm faster than you, smarter than you, stronger than you, and I got the drop on you. And I point my revolver at your back of your head and say, give me your wallet. Do you have a choice? Well, technically, yes. You could say, fuck you, no. And before fuck you got out of your mouth, the bullet would be propelling itself through the back of your skull, out the front of your brain, and for the split second that your brain continued to function, you'd get to watch your gray matter splatter on the wall in front of you, and you would die before you finished saying the words. Now, what do we actually mean? What we actually mean is, do you have freedom of choice? And the answer is no. The only correct answer is to say, yes, sir, here's my wallet. Because if you don't, you die. I have coerced you. I have placed you in a position where you really only can say yes. Even though you could technically say no, you're not going to. And for a very good reason. Labor is the same thing. There's no difference between labor and a gun to the back of your head as it exists in this country. The only difference is the length of time in which it takes the bullet to go through your brain and kill you. In the alley, it's instantaneous. You die in milliseconds. In real life, you die over the next few months or years as you lose your home, lose your possessions, become homeless, and starve to death and freeze in the wintertime or boil in the summertime. Either which way, you die. So that implied threat of homelessness and starvation and death creates a bias in that decision process. So it is not a voluntary contract. No one agrees to work. They understand they have to work or they will die. It is not a voluntary arrangement. It is not a consensual contract. A contract requires no encumbrance. It requires freedom of choice, or it is not a valid contract. We get around this by declaring it valid. We just say so. Even though all logic and reason say it's not, we just say so. Okay? Now, keep in mind, I am not pro-socialism. I am not pro-communism. Communism is not possible. Socialism is horrible. The only thing worse than socialism is democracy. Democracy is about as bad as it gets. You know, I'll take an aggressive, nasty, Third Reich dictatorship over democracy any day, because at least in Hitler's dictatorship, I know I'm in a dictatorship. In a democracy, you're in a dictatorship and you delude yourself into thinking you're not. Now we're talking pure, okay? Of course, societies can have certain parts of the society that are socialist based and democracy based, but we're talking pure isms here. Actual pure socialism, actual pure democracy. In my opinion, a proper society is a balanced mix of all of them. You have a little bit of communism, a little bit of socialism, a little bit of democracy, a little bit of dictatorship, a little bit of capitalism, and you take them all together and you make a nice little bread dough out of it, and you balance them all in a nice, well-regulated, viciously, aggressively, violently maintained free market. That's a proper system. We actually tried that once, and it worked really well. From about 1950 to about 1980. We tried that, and it was amazing. We created the middle class. We created the largest transfer of wealth to the general population that planet Earth has ever seen in its entire history, as long as you weren't black or female. Because we also had some pretty nasty problems with misogyny and racism at the time, too. But if you adjust for those, it was pretty nice time to be alive, in general. So, that's how prices are determined. Market forces and supply and demand do not dictate the price of a product. They dictate how much profit you can command, because the cost of the product is fixed. You can't change the cost. Maybe next year you can. Maybe last year it was different. But right now, as the current system and supply market and supply chain exists, you can't change the cost. No amount of supply and demand can alter the cost. Because if the price goes below the cost, the business owner is going to close up shop and you get nothing. Okay? But a laborer can't do that. Because doing that as a labor product seller equals death. This is why we're supposed to have protections like minimum wage to balance that disproportionate bias of power there, so that it is not such an unbiased gun to your head in a dark alley situation where you really don't have a choice. That was the whole purpose of minimum wage. That was why it was created. Okay. Now, the next video is going to talk about slavery.